the early career committee is charged with identifying and then trying to provide resources for those early career vets. So roughly less than 10 years out post veterinary graduation, what do they need and how can we get them those resources to make sure that they stay successful veterinarians?
Welcome to the Swine Health Blackbelt Podcast, the latest research digested for you. My name is Dr. Clayton Johnson. I am the host of the podcast. And joining me in our illustrious podcast studios this week is Dr. Abbey Canon. Dr. Canon is the Director of Public Health and Communication for the American Association of Swine Veterinarians. Abbey, thank you so much for coming back on the show. If you would, why don't you start with the introduction for the audience?
My name is Abbey Canon, like Dr. Johnson said, and I have been with AASV, the American Association of Swine Veterinarians, for almost 7 years now, in the same role that I started with. So I'm happy to be back on the podcast again.
Well, and AASV is certainly lucky to have you, Abbey. I've been a member of AASV for, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about this before we started, Abbey, but I'm over 20 years now if you include student membership. And AASV has been a huge part of my career. As a student, it was a great way for me to get mentorship. And then certainly mentorship doesn't end when you become a veterinarian. And AASV's mission is to help educate its members. Talk a little bit, if you would, Abbey, about your role as it relates to communications and ultimately how AASV accomplishes that mission of education and mentorship for swine veterinarians that are members.
Yeah, absolutely. So big picture, AASV is the professional organization for swine veterinarians. So we do have international members, we have student members, we have members who work certainly in practice, but also academia, government, public health, research, kind of everything that might involve swine veterinary health. And as you said, as part of our mission, AASV's mission is really educating our members. And another piece of that is recruiting students, mentoring students, and encourage them to have lifelong careers as successful swine veterinarians. So when we look at our broad membership, we want to provide those resources with vets to make sure that they have everything that they need to be a successful veterinarian and care for the majority of swine in the United States. So my role as the Director of Public Health and Communications seems kind of like a hodgepodge of things thrown together, but I really have four big buckets that I work in. So one is public health, all things public health, and that's really varies day to day. So it might be antibiotics, it might be pork safety, a lot of different things. I also work in kind of the advocacy realm, so responding to federal regulations or different laws coming out on speaking on behalf of swine veterinary medicine and swine health. And then I'm responsible for communications, both internally to our members and externally to whatever media might have a question. And then finally, I oversee all of our committees. And AASV committees kind of are in two different areas. One is more animal health specific, so specific diseases, PRRS, influenza, emerging and transboundary disease. And the others are more membership based, so student engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion and early career. So that's really what I want to talk about today. So the Early Career Committee is one of our newer committees. It's only a few years old. It started shortly after I joined AASV. But they have absolutely been a powerhouse of a committee and have accomplished so much in the short time that they've been around. The Early Career Committee is charged with identifying and then trying to provide resources for those early career vets. So roughly less than 10 years out post veterinary graduation, what do they need and how can we get them those resources to make sure that they stay successful veterinarians?
it doesn't surprise me that the early career committee is active, because when you get around young people, they crave mentorship and knowledge. And if they don't see an immediate pathway to go get it, they're willing to create that pathway. They're willing to make specific requests of here's what we want, here's how we want it, and here's ultimately how we want to use it to be better veterinarians.
Exactly. And that is what this committee is doing over and over again. Two of their really big projects that they've taken charge of the last several years. One is looking at retention of veterinarians. And we know, looking across our AASV membership, talking to producers, knowing our vet clinics, we know that there are early career veterinarians leaving swine practice. But why? We could speculate, we can guess, but we needed to ask the question. And the early career committee took charge of that. And I will save all of that for another day, because that is an entirely different conversation that we should have. I hope I get to come back and talk about that. But looking into retention issues and attrition in swine veterinary practice for our early career vets. So kind of simultaneously with that, the early career committee also recognized that there is a need for post-vet school education training resources, things that you don't get in vet school, especially for swine veterinary medicine, and that you might not be getting in that first year in the field. So it's like drinking out of a fire hose when you get out of vet school, and you learn a ton in your first days, weeks, months, year. But what isn't coming just in practice? What are you not getting and what's missing? So the early career committee said, that's what we need. That's what we as early career vets need. So in talking with Dr. Clayton Johnson, we brainstormed at the AASV annual meeting one year on, this is a great idea. How do we make this happen? What can we do? So AASV was very lucky to chase down and receive a federal grant from the USDA NIFA Veterinary Services Grant Program within the Education, Extension, and Outreach component of just over $200,000 to put together a very unique early career veterinarian program that was led by participants. They picked the topics, they identified what they needed to know, and put this program on for just about 3 years to provide all of those resources for those early career vets.
Abby, it was a pleasure to be a part of it, and the best part for me was I kind of got to be a facilitator for it, but I really didn't have to do a whole lot of work because, as you said, the participants picked the topics. They told you and I exactly what they wanted to learn. And I think it'd be good to share with our audience, what were the things that these young veterinarians were interested in learning? What were the topics that they said, this is the stuff that we feel like we're not going to be good at our job if we don't develop skills here? Do you have kind of an overview of what all technical topics were discussed there?
Yeah, it was some we expected and some were surprises. So again, emphasizing it was the participants that picked. We selected 25 individuals who fit some criteria to be a part of this program. And the AASV board of directors, Clayton and I, the early career committee, some other practitioners threw together a list of things that we thought and that they thought would be likely topics that you would need after your first year in practice. And so we got this group of 25 participants together, talked about this list, but said, it is yours to tear apart and make a new one if you want to. And they did. They added a lot of topics. And so after that very first initial meeting, the 25 participants went through the list that we provided and the list that they came up with to rank, what is most important. I think an incredibly important part of this is it was a 3-year program. So halfway through, we asked them again, right? Because they've already been in practice a few more years and things change, disease pressures change, foreign animal disease issues change, laws change. So what changed during that year and a half that you might re-rank differently? So they had an opportunity to provide feedback throughout the course of this program. Some of the topics that came up, and Clayton, I'll have you talk about whatever your favorite one was also. Again, it was a big variety. So the first thing that we did was communication training. And we used that as a foundation. The AASV board really wanted this group to focus on that as a foundation. And throughout the entire program, we use those communication pieces that we learned to communicate with each other, to communicate in communities across the board, applying those lessons. But they also dove into non-infectious disease issues, so focusing primarily on nutrition, focused on risk management, some of the business aspects of swine practice, talked about ventilation. That was a big one, and we got some on-farm time for that one too. They toured the National Bio and Agro Defense Facility in Manhattan, Kansas, and Bath. Very unique opportunity for them. But we explored all of these topics, brought in speakers that were experts in their area, and then also paired it with some type of a peer networking event. So that might have been, very informal tailgate in a parking lot, talking to each other, just getting to know each other, to a more formal sit-down dinner. Across the board, we made sure that we had some type of peer networking event to develop those friendships, is what it ended up being, but that strong professional peer network throughout the program. So I got ahead of myself a little bit, but Clayton, I do want to ask you, what was your favorite module or topic that the participants chose?
It's like picking your favorite kid, Abby. Even if you have one, you really shouldn't say it in public. You know what I'm saying? And I took something away from all of them. The communication one is always great. It's a ton of fun to see people learn more about themselves and learn more about, opportunities to communicate better with folks that are different than they are. That was great. On the technical side, you mentioned going to the NBAF facility in Manhattan. We also get to spend time with the Kansas State nutrition team, and Jordan Gephardt in particular, who's a DVM and a PhD nutritionist, did an awesome job. We got great feedback on the survey from the participants on that about demystifying some of the nutrition discussion, and ultimately teaching the veterinarians how to have a productive conversation with your nutritionist when you think there's an opportunity or you want to investigate if there's an opportunity. So that one sticks out. And then on the personal side, I had a ton of fun with the last formal one that we did in Champaign, Illinois. We went to a barbecue restaurant and sat down, and by that point we were friends and just learning a little bit more about the participants. We kind of like bared our soul a little bit about goofy hobbies that we all had, and we ended up talking about things like collecting sports cards and different sorts of like arts and crafts that people were in. And we as technical people are inherently pretty nerdy, and it was fun to kind of see that come out. And I learned some things about the participants that I'm going to enjoy chatting with them about every time I see them at AASV annual meetings and things like that going forward. So there were pieces of all of them that I really got a lot out of. It's hard for me to narrow down one that really stuck out. I thought they were all valuable, both technically and in terms of building a network to help each and every person in their journey going forward. We had fun, but at the same time, Abby, we had to justify to the grant providers at NIFA that it was more than fun. And we had to do pre-test and post-test to assess, was there any knowledge building that was there? You want to talk a little bit about that process and I guess verifying for folks that it was more than just having a beer and pulled pork and talking about what's going on in life.
Yes, exactly. And we do make it sound like a lot of fun, and it was, but very much it was a learning environment from day one. So we did require everyone to take a pre-test and a post-test that was on that topic that they selected. So ventilation, for example. And then we scored those. So how did you do before? How did you do after? And consistently across the board, there was knowledge gained in every single module. And we also had participants submit an evaluation of each module. So what did you like? What didn't you like? What should we keep doing? What should we do differently? Again, every single person had positive feedback for every single module. I don't think I've ever seen survey responses quite that positive with not a whole lot of negative to say. So I was very happy to receive those after every module. So consistently, again, it was positive feedback. Yes, we should keep doing this program. Yes, we should keep spreading it out throughout the country. Yes, we should still let participants pick their topics. Overall, they were very happy with the entire program. But one thing that I think every single person took away that maybe is the most important, at least that's what people said was the most important, was that peer network that they came away with at the end of the day, at the end of the program.
Salmonella presents significant challenges to pig health and performance and poses food safety risks to humans. As the first and only vaccine offering live attenuated strains of both Salmonella cholerae and Typhimurium, Enterosol Salmonella TC from Boehringer Ingelheim protects pigs against both serotypes with a single oral dose. Talk to your Boehringer Ingelheim representative to learn more.
I do think it'd be appropriate for us to say some thank yous to the people who supported it, the people who are now a part of these Young Veterinarians Network and who were the real mentors of the technical parts of the classes, the people we leaned on for the technical content that the Young Veterinarians told us they wanted. And it probably starts with really saying thank you to Sherry Webb. Sherry didn't teach any individual classes, but she did the most important part, which was heavy lifting on the grant writing to ultimately get this thing to the finish line. So to Sherry, if you're listening out there, thank you for that. I scratched down some names here, and I hope I didn't forget anybody. But Daryl Holtkamp did an amazing job with economics and helping veterinarians not only with business economics but their personal economics. Billy Flowers led that ventilation course you mentioned in North Carolina and got us into some of their pig barns there at the university, North Carolina State University, and that was fantastic. Luke Wells with professional ag marketing. I think he floored some of our participants with how important managing risk is to pig producers and how much value can be created if you do it well, how much value you leave on the table if you don't do it well. Larry Firkins talked about leadership. He always does an amazing job there. Elanco Animal Health, they sponsored that original module on communication and got us a professional teacher to come in and talk about the different colors of personality that we all have and how to use those in our communication process. And really want to thank all those people who have become a part of your and my network, but more importantly, they've become a part of the Young Veterinarians Network.
Thank you, Clayton, and same to you. We could not have done this without you. You were such an important piece of this entire program. And as you mentioned, we are certainly not naming everybody. There were so many volunteers that made this happen that we are incredibly thankful for.
For Dr. Abbey Canon, my name is Dr. Clayton Johnson. It's been our pleasure to spend some time with you, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.